Well, we have been in a great series called Copy and Paste. And we've been looking at the life of Jesus, and what he did, his character, and trying to insert that into our own life, to learn to imitate Jesus, copy and then paste it into our life. And if you've missed any of the last two Sundays, I want to encourage you to go check out our website or our YouTube page and really listen and watch those sermons. Steve did a great job breaking down Jesus as the humble servant in week 1. And then in week 2, last week, we saw how Jesus lived a life of inclusion. That we're all invited, no matter where we are in life. And when Steve and I were talking about this series of copy and paste, and he had this idea of this, I got excited because in my own personal journey, my own personal life, in the beginning of the year, I decided to just read the Gospels over and over and over again. A slow read, a reflective read. I wanted to find more and more about the things I've maybe missed about Jesus. How do I implement that into my life? And so when he said, hey, we're going to do this copy and paste series, what do you think? I'm like, oh, that's great. I've been doing this. I like this. This is great. And so one of the things, though, that I've been noticing in my study time is that Jesus had this most amazing prayer life. Like, it was incredible, an incredible prayer life. And the writers of the Gospels mention it over and over and over, and they're very intentional in what they were doing. They wanted us to hear it, to catch it, to hold on to it, and they wanted to implement it into our life. And because I'm going to be only here for a few minutes, like 45 hour. I'm just going to do an overview, right? 2 hours. See, Steve does longer, like, welcome things and news of the community and benedictions. I do longer sermons. So that's just the way it is. No, I'll try to wrap this up. But because it is a short sermon, I can only do an overview of his prayer life. But I want to encourage you to go home throughout this week and study the Gospels. Read through the Gospels and then underline every time that it says Jesus prayed or the intention of prayer. And then look at what was happening before and look what was happening after. And go, okay, what was going on? I mean, it's a great study. So I want to encourage you to do that. Now, for many of us, prayer is not the foundational part of our lives. We either don't understand prayer, and so our prayers are minimal, or we were raised in reciting words over and over and over, but what were meant for connection and intimacy, they've lost their meaning. We also often say, I'm just too busy to pray right now, right? Like, and I find myself, I get trapped into that my life is so busy, right? From morning to night, I've got all these things going on, and I'm saying these quick prayers to God of God, help me with this, God, help me with that, Lord, thank you for this, but they're quick. And oftentimes people will say, hey, Josh, how can I pray for you? And I say, if you can pray for my time management. That's really what I need. I got so much going on. If I could just get everything in just the day, that would be great. But what I'm not asking for is, hey, could you pray for me to have more time to pray? Maybe that's what I should be praying for. Maybe I'll get more out of my day if I start having more time to pray and to connect with God. You know, the interesting thing is that Jesus' life was pretty busy, right? I mean, I think his life was probably a little bit more busy than mine, right? I don't have like thousands of people wanting to hear me teach, right? I don't have thousands of people who want to just hang out with me and get healed by me. I don't have 12 disciples following me all the time or 120 other people following me all the time that I can't get away from most of the time. I don't got thousands of emails coming in, right? I mean, Jesus was pretty busy. And yet what the scriptures show over and over and over again is that he actually took time to get away to be with God. And in Luke 6:12, it says this, one of those days Jesus went out to a mountainside and to pray. And he spent the night praying to God, all night praying to God. It says in Mark chapter 1, verse 35, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up and left the house and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Early in the morning, late at night, is when Jesus got away to spend time with his Father. To spend time. And the Gospels talk about Jesus going into solitary places. That is often his customs, to break off from the crowds and from his disciples, to get alone with God. And many times we see Jesus get into nature. I don't know about you, but I love getting into nature. Just even taking a drive, right? And getting off into Tesla and Mines Road, right? Just to get away from it all. And we see him do this. Gets in solitary area so he can just focus in and connect with God. And I'm wondering, when he does this, he encounters God the Father, but he's doing it to seek wisdom, to seek direction. He's praying over those he encounters during the day. He's getting refilled up by the Spirit so that he can continue to heal people. He's handing over his hurts. He's praising God for what's happening. And he's finding time for peace and to resolve with the will of God in his life. He's doing this just to break away. What a wonderful example. And the question is, do we do this? And if we do this, is it often? I find it difficult to get quiet during the day. That's really hard for me, but my mornings is the time for me. I love my mornings. If I can just get away and just focus in on that time when it's before people are awake and moving around the house, right? It's hard to find that time, but maybe your time is in the middle of the day. Maybe your time's at night. It doesn't matter. But take time to break off and get some solitude often with God. Those that I know that have a rich prayer life never regret finding more time with God. They never say, oh, that was a waste of time. No, they find it a very rich life. Jesus' prayer life wasn't just in solitary places. He prayed before major life events, like in Luke 3, when he was baptized, or Mark 1, before his public ministry, and going from town to town, preaching the kingdom of God was near. In Luke 6, he prayed before choosing his disciples. In Luke 9, we see Jesus pray before he reveals who he is to his disciples and telling them how he would eventually die and then raise on the third day. And when life brings us major life decisions with our jobs, with our families, if we have to move, if things are happening within our life, we must be mindful to be in prayer and allow God to enter into our process, seeking God for wisdom, direction, and peace. Jesus said everything that he did and said was from the Father, was from God. And the mission within how he lived his life was to glorify God. And it was through Jesus' prayer life which he was connected him to God the Father in such a way to guide his steps daily. And you might say, well, that was Jesus, of course. That's not for me. That's not what's expected of me, right? And no, it is. Jesus is our example of a prayer life, of being connected to God, to have that intimate relationship with God. But it starts with prayer. The foundation is prayer. Jesus' connection was through prayer, and that should also be our connection as well. We see Jesus praying in all kinds of different life situations, from praying before he ate in Matthew 14:19, took bread, took the fish, blessed it, gave thanks for the provision, and fed about 4,000 or 5,000 people. But he prayed before he ate. We see Jesus praying when he was weary and tired from ministry in Mark 6. We see Jesus encourage his disciples to pray so they don't fall into temptation on the night of his arrest in Luke 22. And in that same exact chapter, we see Jesus under great distress, incredible grief of knowing he was going to be betrayed and put to death. Luke writes that he was so stressed, his body was under so intense pressure that the capillaries under his skin would burst and that he was sweating blood. Matthew writes that Jesus says to his disciples that his soul is deeply grieved to the point of death. Have you ever been under immense stress? Have you ever gone through immense grief? Well, Jesus gets it. He understands what you're going through. The Gospel of Mark says 3 times Jesus says, he prays, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." 3 times. Let this cup pass from me. Yet not as my will, but as your will. 3 times the answer was no. And it's hard to get the answer of no to our prayers. It's hard to understand the sovereignty of God. I'm not going to sit up here today and say, "Oh, I totally understand the sovereignty of God." No, I don't understand it. I question it. I get frustrated with it. It's okay to do that and question it. But we understand the sovereignty of God, and Jesus understood the sovereignty of God. He asked for this cup to be taken away, and it was no. Have you ever been told no in your prayers? I have. It's hard. And Jesus gets it. He understands it. But then I look at his resolve when he gets told no. When he finally understands this cup isn't going to be taken from him. He brushes himself up. He gets up and he faces what's going to be before him, which is a betrayal, which is going to be lying, which is going to be mocking, and it's going to be a beating, it's going to be crucifixion, and ultimately it will be his death. Once he got the no, he got himself up. He understood the sovereignty of God. Doesn't mean he liked it, and he went forward. And throughout Jesus' life, he experienced extreme highs and he experienced extreme lows. And yet through all those emotions and experiences, it was met with and grounded in prayer. And if we are to copy and paste Jesus, imitate Jesus into our lives, we must also have a prayer life that connects us to a God that loves us, wants the best for us, that will sustain us, and that will fill us. But you might be saying, "Oh, okay, great prayer. How do I get started?" Maybe you are sitting here today and you're not someone who prays a lot, right? And that's not a foundation of your life. Don't beat yourself up, but start today. God is calling you in to spend time with you. And there's some easy ways of doing this. And the church has come up with some great acronyms out there. And one of them that I actually kind of like is called ACTS, A-C-T-S. Which stands for adoration, which is praising God. Confession, which is the confession of sin in our lives and asking for forgiveness. And thanksgiving, which is telling God what you're thankful for. And then supplication, which is sharing your needs and requests. Acts. It's a simple way of getting started. You just go through each one, each little stage there. Start off with Acts. Another one that I actually love is prayer of examine. And examine is an old Jesuit prayer and is a practice of discerning the voice and activity of God within the flow of the day. It's a vehicle that creates deeper awareness of God-given desires in one life. This is done by getting into a quiet space, right? Not just quiet in the room, but quiet in our minds, right? Quieting it down. And then we start to ask reflective questions. And usually this is done at the end of the day. Questions like this. When did I have the deepest sense of connection with God, others, and myself? And you think about it. You contemplate it throughout your whole day where you saw it. And then you move on to when today have I had the least sense of connection? And you think about it, and you contemplate, and you keep on going. And then the next question might be, when did I give and receive the most love today? You think about your whole day of where you received love. And then the next question would be, where did I not receive love today? The idea of examine is to look over the life and see the God moments. Because I don't know if you are like this, but I wake up, I make my breakfast and coffee, and then all of a sudden I'm making dinner. It's like it goes by so fast. And sometimes we miss those God moments in our lives. There's some videos out there on YouTube if you want to ever check out and kind of get into this prayer of examine. You just type in prayer of examine. Examine is spelled E-X-A-M-E-N. E-X-A-M-E-N. So for examine. And I find it interesting. The disciples, they were with Jesus for like 3.5 years, right? They're watching him. They're seeing him heal people, cast out demons, walk on water, feed thousands of people, give incredible sermons and parables, and gathering thousands of people around him. And yet, what they ask him is, teach us to pray. They didn't say, hey, teach us how to gather a good crowd. They didn't ask, hey, how did you prepare that sermon? Teach us how to teach. Hey, how'd you cast that demon out? Teach us to cast that demon out. They didn't ask those things. They asked, how do you pray? Because the disciples understood that wherever Jesus got his power from, wherever he got his teachings from, wherever he was able to do these miraculous things, it started with prayer. They understood it, and we need to catch on to that and hold on to that. You know, we say the Our Father, the Lord's Prayer. And when the disciples asked Jesus, hey, teach us to pray, this is what he taught them, the Lord's Prayer. And it's a prayer that we say almost every week. Dania says it after the pastoral prayer. And I love this prayer. It's a beautiful prayer. It's been said for over 2,000 years, and yet we say it here together. The thing about it, though, and the problem that can occur, whether it's the Acts prayer or the Examine prayer or the Lord's Prayer, is that repetition sometimes hurts us because we're saying it so fast. We're not thinking about the words we're really saying. I used to swim in high school, and we get to NCS and E-ball, and they would have these swimming warm-up lanes, right, before your race. And one of the things that I would do is actually recite the Lord's Prayer over and over and over. I have no clue why I did it. I don't know. It brought me peace. It brought me comfort. I don't know what I was doing, but I just kept on praying. Maybe I thought that God would let me win the race if I said this prayer. I don't know what I was doing. I wasn't thinking of the words. But it brought me some peace, and it helped me focus in, but I wasn't thinking of what I was saying. We got some music going on. I like that. It brought me some peace. Thank you for that. And I think that sometimes here, when we say the Lord's Prayer, we just say it real quick, real fast. So I want to take a moment, just a moment, to kind of walk through the Lord's Prayer. Okay? It's found in Luke 11, 2 through 4, Matthew 6, 9 through 13. So you guys ready? Here we go. Our Father who art in heaven, right? That's how it starts. And what's interesting about this is that in the Jewish culture, they would not even write God or Yahweh. It was out of reverence. It was sacred. The name of God could not be spoken, right? There would be a little dash, right, where God would be inputted. And yet Jesus does something here really interesting. He equates this God, the creator of all things, to his Father. So personal, so intimate. And for some of us, that might trip us up a little bit, right? Because maybe we didn't have a good dad growing up or no dad at all. Maybe we're looking at Jesus and saying, why are you putting this male thing over who God is? But we understand, all right? We understand that God is neither male or female. He could have said mother here. He's doing something different for the disciples. He's taking an impersonal God and making it very personal. He's saying daddy at this moment. That's beautiful. And so we have to ask that question when we're saying that, is God personal to you? Or is God distant? Hallowed be your name. Yet in that next phrase, crazy, from personal to super, your name is holy. Your name is above all names. Your name is the great I am. And I have to be so reverent to your name. How do we put together this intimate relationship together with the sacredness and reverence we should have with God? I think we're going to have a lifetime of trying to figure these things out, of how to do that. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Have you ever thought of what that means? Maybe a better word would be than kingdom, because we don't really deal with kingdoms anymore, would be reign or rule. What would it be like if Jesus was physically here to rule this world? What kind of peace would we have? What kind of love would be shown? What kind of provision would be given? What would that instill in us to love and cherish each other? Where equality for all would not only be said, but actually felt and lived out. The question would be, do you really want to have God as our ruler? I think for some of us, we actually would like to rule over God. And you're like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. But some of our prayers are just trying to convince God of getting our way. And that convicts me, right? God, I want you to do what I want. I've laid out all these plans, and I want you to bless them now. I've got it all organized. You don't have to do anything. Just bless it. Right? We tell God what is fair and what is just. So really we were praying, my kingdom come, my will be done. God, here's what I think should be done. Just stamp of approval. That's all I need. Instead, our prayers should be whatever you want. Here are my best plans, but let me tell you, if it's not right, okay, your will be done. Whatever you deem is right. Next line is, give us this day our daily bread. You know, how many of us pray just for our daily provision? That's it. I find myself not praying for my daily provision. I say, gosh, Lord, I hope I have enough in my savings. Lord, I'm looking at my future for retirement. Lord, I hope there's enough because the stock market, did you see what happened in the stock market? I mean, that's where our fear comes in, right? And God's like, Jesus is like, no. Just focus in on today. Be thankful for today. Thank you for this provision that you've given us today. Don't get so far ahead. You don't even know if you're going to be around tomorrow. Proverbs 38, verse 8 says this, give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food that is my portion, that I not be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Or that I not be in want and steal and profane the name of my God. Not so wealthy that I'm like, I don't need God. Not so poor that I'm stealing and defaming who God is. Just daily provision. Can we sit right there? Well, I think that's a prayer of wisdom. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Did you hear what I just said? Forgive me just like I've forgiven all those people that have hurt me and I've been offended by. It's like the portion of forgiveness that I'm giving out is what I expect to get from God. That's scary to me. What if I have an unforgiving heart to someone? But here's the thing. We understand that God is full of grace and mercy and forgiveness. His forgiveness is way greater than ours, right? We're human. But Jesus is reminding us that because God is full of that grace and mercy and forgiveness, that we should forgive others just like he forgives us. That we can act not for that person's sake that hurt you, but because when we do when we do forgive, we are free. We experience freedom. Next line is, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Is that your heart today? Do you want to be delivered from evil? Jesus' name, the root word for it means to save. Jesus can help you with the temptations of your life and deliver you from the evil that is in this world. That when we say yes to Jesus, when we decide to follow Jesus, his love and forgiveness and grace and mercy sets us free. That's what a relationship with Christ does. So in closing, I'd like us to pray the Lord's Prayer together. And we're going to do a little differently. We're going to slow it down a little bit. We're going to pause a little after and just contemplate each line and pray through that line, wherever God leads you on that. And then I'll start us up. You'll see when I start you up on the next line. All right? You guys with me? All right, let's close our eyes. Let's get comfortable. Those of you that are online, I encourage you to do this in your home with your families. Just get quiet. Here we go. Our Father, who art in heaven. No, we're just going to sit with quiet. Just think about that line. I know it's easy to just go right to the next one, but let's just sit with that line for just a little bit. Our Father, who art in heaven. Hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And all together, for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen.